Scotty Braun, AJ Brzezinski, Eric Kratz, and Ken Rosenthal. So, Ken, hello to you, and let's just continue the conversation we were running through 2 minutes ago. When you see the story about Kevin Brown, broken by awful announcing, and then elaborate details from our friend, your colleague, Britt Giroli, what was your reaction? And I specifically also want to hear your reaction to the clip itself, because everyone refers to graphics that are like that every day.
Well, as for the clip itself, Scott, I had the same reaction you did. I kept looking for what the problem was, and there could be no problem. He wasn't criticizing the team, he was praising the team. So the whole thing just seems so odd and curious to me. But I've covered the Angelos ownership of the Orioles for a long time. I was at the Baltimore Sun when Peter Angelos took over the team in 1993. I was at the Baltimore Sun when Peter Angelos let John Miller go after the 96 season, and I was a columnist at that time. And that was about John Miller not bleeding black and orange. That was the phrase. Angelos said, I want our announcers to bleed a little bit for the home team. John Miller was and is a great play-by-play man and someone who was direct and honest and did not sugarcoat, but did not go out of his way to be negative either. So he was, at the time, quite a popular figure in Baltimore, as you can imagine. This guy went on to ESPN, to San Francisco Giants the next year, where he still is today, 27 years later. He won the Ford C. Frick Award for Excellence in Broadcasting from the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And so when this news broke yesterday, it just reminded me of that whole thing. Now, that was Peter Angelos. This is John Angelos. But it's the same family, and it seems to me, unless we hear otherwise, and we have not heard peep out of the Orioles, this is the same kind of thing. The only difference is what Kevin Brown is alleged to have done was far less than anything John Miller did, and John Miller didn't do anything. So that's where we are.
John Miller bleeds black and orange. I don't understand where they were wrong. He went from the Orioles to the Giants. It's Halloween every day for him. I mean, it's been Halloween every day for him for 50 years. And his Birkenstocks and shorts, it was the greatest. He's one of the best. How can the Orioles and Kevin Brown, I know he's coming back, what, Friday they said? Or
yes, Friday.
This week, right? Friday?
Yep.
How can he just come back on the air and say, okay, I'm back, guys, and everyone, because the cat's out of the bag now, and the fans are going to tune in and say, oh, this is the guy that said good things about our team, and he was suspended. So, hey, welcome back, Kevin. We love you.
Well, I can't speak for Kevin, obviously, but AJ, you do this job, and I would imagine Kevin gets back on the air, conducts himself as he's always conducted himself, professionally, and makes no mention of this, nor should he. He should just go out and call Orioles games the way he has and the way he's entertained fans and informed fans for his entire tenure there. This guy is one of the bright lights of the business. I believe he's 32 years old, and look at where he is. So, frankly, as others have mentioned, the Orioles are lucky to have him, and he'll go do his thing and be Kevin Brown. The fact that this happened in the middle of a season, their best season in years, at a time when they are peaking, just goes to show the level of pettiness involved. This is not what you want people talking about or reading about. What people should be talking about is the team itself, their performance, and yet that is not the case here.
To avoid this pettiness, should announcers not be paid by the teams?
Eric, I can't really speak to that. And in so many cases, the teams have an ownership stake in the network or a partnership with the network, and that's why they have say. And in a perfect world, yes, everything would be independent and people could speak their minds freely. That's not the world we live in. So what you're talking about is an ideal, and that is not something that's realistic at this stage. It's just a situation where in so many cases, there is that strong tie, and yeah, the team does have a say over who its announcers are. And actually, if you think about it, AJ kind of touched on this earlier, it should, because the announcers are so closely affiliated with the team. In many cases, they are team employees. I get that. We all get that. Doesn't mean you can't have an objective booth. The Mets booth, for example, they will clearly point out anytime they see a problem on the field, off the field, whatever the case might be. Gary Cohen, Ron Darling, Keith Hernandez. There are other booths like that as well. And those booths have credibility. They are widely respected by the fans. The fans understand that they're not necessarily out there, the broadcasters, to rip the team, but they're going to say what they believe if a certain kind of play occurs or a certain incident occurs. That's what a good quality broadcaster does. The best teams, in terms of their ownership with regard to this situation, they understand that. They understand that a Gary Cohen brings you a certain credibility that a pom-pom waving announcer would not.
Ken, Hawk takes that personally, okay?
Hawk's a different category. Hawk, I mean, we all love Hawk, and that's a whole different thing. And there's a place for those guys too. Let's face it. And a lot of fans greatly enjoy guys like Hawk. And some fans, not all, but some, much prefer that. They only want to hear the good. Listen, free country, everyone has their opinions, that's fine. But when you have a booth like, for instance, the Mets have, it brings a certain credibility with your fan base, and it elevates your broadcast, quite frankly.
Ken, that's why, as you know, as national broadcasters, when we go in and do a game, everyone thinks we hate their team because we're giving both sides. We're saying, hey, they're doing this well and they're not doing this well. This is why they're in first place. This is why they're in last place. So you get it all the time. You know it. I get it. You get it. Everybody's, John Smoltz gets it. Joe Buck is famous for talking about it all the time, about how everyone thinks he hates every team on earth. And it's just a weird thing. But the thing for me is the Orioles aren't the first team to do this. There's been other teams that have done this. The Angels did it, right? I think the Diamondbacks had a weird thing with their announcer where he didn't wear the right shirt and he wouldn't say the right thing. There's been more than, it's not just the Orioles. Are we too sensitive as owners and teams and too controlling of how these people work?
My answer would be yes. And again, AJ, when you conduct yourself as an ownership group in this fashion, and let's just stick to the Orioles for a minute, it reflects poorly on the Orioles. I don't know that there are many fans out there today who are saying, you know what, Kevin Brown deserved it, man. They stuck it to him and good. He shouldn't have said that. No. So who's the clown here? Who is the fall guy? It's not Kevin. It's the ownership. It's John Angelos. And ultimately, that is not a good thing. And I don't understand at times why owners don't see that there is a credibility associated with an objective broadcast, that if they do interfere, it will be perceived in a certain way and not in a positive way for the most part. So I don't know the answer here. People are going to be sensitive. Owners in particular are going to be sensitive. I think we all understand that. But there's sensitivity and there's absurdity, and this was absurdity.
John Angelos, he's just like us. He's the only person who's looking at things that way. Last thing I'll say is what you mentioned. For every problem that you hear about that gets public, I promise you, there are many, many, many stories just like this that don't get out. And why do I promise you? Because I know them. I've heard them over the years. We probably all have issues with the broadcasts and owners and networks, and depending on what the situation is, things get touchy. But this situation in particular is ridiculous. All right, Ken, let's get to your article from yesterday. I wanted to ask for you to elaborate on the Red Sox running out of reasons to be inactive at the trade deadline. I've used this line many times over the past year. The Red Sox get weird at the trade deadline the past couple years. Why?
I don't know. And the article was basically a column saying, okay, they can conduct themselves a certain way. You can rationalize anything. You can justify anything. But at some point, as an organization, you have to push forward. You have to go not all in at the deadline. No one really goes all in except the Angels. We see how that's worked out. But make a push. And they have not done that under Chaim Bloom, who took over before the 2020 season. 2020, of course, the pandemic year, you throw it out. The Red Sox were not a good team anyway. 21, they obviously went to the ALCS, but at the deadline, yes, they acquired Schwarber, but they didn't make a big push because they didn't feel their farm system was strong enough, and it was an extreme seller's market. Last year, they kind of went halfway on selling, bought a little bit. It was a weird deal. They sold Christian Vasquez, traded him, and then did not follow that up by trading Evaldi and JD Martinez, which could have gotten them under the luxury tax threshold. So what are you doing? And then this year, I actually, looking at them compared to last year, the fact that they kept their guys, they kept Paxton, they kept Justin Turner, the veterans that they possibly could have traded. Adam Duvall was another one. And then they added Luis Urias, pretty good infielder. Okay, they were not in a great position of strength, 25% chance of making the postseason. But my point was, in this column, at some point, stop making excuses and go forward. Now, they would say we have not reached that point yet. We're not strong enough competitively this year to have done that. We have not been in the past strong enough in terms of our prospects to do that. Okay, but you keep building, and they are building, and they've developed a pretty good core now. Well, what about next year? If you're only at 40% playoff odds, are you going to just say, this is a math equation? No, at some point, you play in Boston. You've got to go. And that was really the gist of the column.
All right. From the Red Sox to our favorite team here, the White Sox. Since AJ won't ask the question, what is your
Homer.
favorite? He's a homer, yes. What is your favorite part of this mess, or most just mind-spinning part of this mess that's going on?
There's no favorite part. It's not a funny thing at all. The one thing that stands out to me, and I'll confess on this one, last year, I think it was the end of August, I wrote a column basically addressed directly to Tony La Russa saying, "Dear Tony, it's not working." He was out at the time with his health issues. I said, you shouldn't come back. They're playing better under Cairo, and just that's it. It hasn't worked. My understanding at the time was that La Russa was a huge part of that problem. My feeling now is that obviously there were many other problems that a new manager didn't solve, that there were cultural embedded issues that have not been addressed. Now, La Russa was part of the issue. Okay, that's fine. But man, it's incredible just how this has come apart. And what Keenan Middleton said, and what was backed up by Lance Lynn on this very show, it holds some validity, obviously. Two players feel that way. They're on the record as saying that. It's not being made up. So they talk about addressing their cultural issues. They talked a lot about it yesterday. They haven't done it. And at some point, they've got to figure this out and get better as an organization. Frankly, this is embarrassing, what has happened to them. And they too play in a large market. And here they are just kind of floundering around. So I'm not sure I need to write an apology to La Russa just yet. But put it this way, it wasn't entirely him, that's for sure.
Did you have any problem with what Rick Hahn said about Keenan Middleton's comments? Because he went into a story basically about how he said he wanted to come back next year. I felt like that part was either unnecessary or even a little bit of a threat. Like, obviously, you're not coming back now. And I will say, I give credit to Keenan for actually speaking out in this way. I know we had most fans in the chat were like, thank you for pointing this out, things that we had all been speculating, right? But I want to make sure that players do feel like they have a safe space to be able to speak out when an organization in his mind is not being run correctly, spoke the truth, and then his other teammates backed him up. So I just don't want other guys to be scared, because I do see this sometimes where players are like, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm going to be a free agent soon. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I know what you're saying. And what Keenan Middleton said was the exception, that line of remark. He basically told Jesse Rogers of ESPN what he thought about the organization, what ailed the organization. And of course, we all, as reporters, want players speaking out all the time, but they don't always feel comfortable doing that, which I understand. There are ramifications at times. I was surprised by what Rick Hahn said in response to Middleton, basically accusing Middleton of being part of the problem. Given the depth of the White Sox problems, it would seem to me the better course of action on Hahn's part would have been simply to say, he's entitled to his opinion. We have our own opinions. We've got to fix some things, and not gone after the player. I don't know really why he did that. Rick Hahn's got to be frustrated too, no doubt. This is his team. He's put it together, and it's fallen apart, and he's had to take it apart through trades. But yes, I was surprised to hear Hahn say what he did. And even if what Rick Hahn said was perfectly accurate, that Keenan Middleton acted in his own way unprofessionally. It does him no good, in my opinion, to go after Keenan Middleton.
What's the solution, Ken? I know as a White Sox, everyone knows I'm a White Sox fan. I work for the team. I mean, I'm an ambassador for the fans, and I'm going up there this weekend to play in their golf tournament and go to the game on Sunday and talk to fans and talk to people up there. What's the solution?
I hate to suggest that people should lose jobs ever. I'm not comfortable doing that. I'll write about the possibility, but I don't want to say this guy should be fired. But something has to change here. And Ken Williams and Rick Hahn, they've been there a long time, and it's not working right now. So if you're not going to change management, and Jerry Reinsdorf, for all his faults, is extremely loyal to his employees. If he doesn't want to change management, okay. But you've got to pursue a different direction. You've got to change the entire makeup of that roster. And it's not going to be easy to do. You've got some players under longer term deals, but you kind of have to gut the clubhouse and just start over. Now, whether that's with Rick Hahn and Ken Williams or whether it's with new front office, it doesn't really matter. Either way, in my view, it has to happen because this combination of players has not worked.
Good stuff, Ken. Appreciate it, and especially the broadcast part of things too at the top. I'm dumbfounded. So glad we had you on today.
Next time I work with Ken and he brings up something that we had already talked about in pre-production, I'm gonna say, "Well, Ken, you're suspended."
Good. I'm sure you'll have a good time with this.
One more point, guys. Mm-hmm. I love how the Orioles are claiming it's not a suspension. A guy is taken off the air in the middle of one of the best seasons in years. He's a play-by-play man. He's a young guy. He's healthy. He's just taking 2 weeks off? Come on. Don't further insult our intelligence.
That's absurd. It's absurd. We're not stupid. Like, especially nowadays. You can't get away with that shit. No, I'm telling you.
No.
Thank you, Ken, and enjoy your time. I didn't even know if I wanted to say it, but we're going to do the Fair Territory promo because we know AJ's going to get on you, but a well-deserved 1 week off of Fair Territory. He did 2 last week. Enough. Ken, enjoy the short break before the big stretch after that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ken. Fair Territory is up there for you on YouTube, on Apple and Spotify. If you want to listen to it, it is fantastic, and it was released yesterday. You can find it in a variety of spots.